This is my home generator setup. I've looked on YouTube a lot and I didn't see exactly what I was wanting to know, and so I just thought I'd go over my setup that I figured out and came up with. I really like this PTO driven generator. I originally was going to go with a Generac, but I'm not. A, I don't want to have the extra maintenance on the engine, and B, I don't want the extra expense of how expensive it is, and C, I know the engines are, they're good, it's just, they're not meant to leave on days on end if you're that kind of weather like I was in February of 2021. So what I did is I reverted back to another idea I'd come across, was a PTO driven generator. The price on them is far lower than a standby. The downside is you have to have a manual disconnect instead of an automatic. The upside is the automatic transfer switch is a failure point. It's a big failure point for a higher percentage of installations that I wanted to go with. And I talked to some of the people who sold them, and I rather just do manual. We don't have anybody in the house that's on medical equipment that requires constant power, and our house is really well insulated, so we can go 30 minutes, an hour without having to worry about it, see if it comes back on again. You know, we've been 2.5 hours, and in the summer, August, it was hot, but it really wasn't a problem in our house. So this seemed to be a really good solution for us financially too. I didn't have to spend so much because we're not going to use it that often. So what I did was, you'll see the two double throw disconnects in the back of the house. I knew that I was going with some kind of backup system. So the disconnect on the right was pre-wired in with all the cables hidden inside the walls. Afterwards, when I went with this, I really started doing the power consumption readings on all the circuits, turning everything on the house. I was actually able to run both of the units for the bedrooms, the master and the children's on the opposite side of the house, along with any other accessories that was on the second breaker panel. And the first panel is the, you could say, life support kind of equipment, creature comforts, everything from septic system to one central heat and air unit in the middle of the house where everybody can gather, and all the kitchen, all the refrigerators and freezers, everything. So I bought a 22 kW PTO generator, and it is, with my tractor, I've got about 32 horsepower with the PTO, so it gives me 16 kW power. But actually, I might be able to push it a little more, but I didn't want to peak out the equipment, so I'd rather buy oversized, and that way I don't stress it so much. So I bought the next size up, which is 22 kW. Again, the other one probably would work just fine, but also on the 22 kW, the connectors on it are Anderson power products, and I sell those at work. My company has those in stock, so I can make all the connections and crimps and everything, and make my own cables there. You'll see coming out of that one double throw disconnect, the black cable has, well, that's blue duct tape and a grocery store trash bag. The downside of using Anderson is that water can get in there. I haven't had the problem. What I do is I just duct tape the plastic on there, and I keep it sealed up pretty well. So I can probably change over to a lot more expensive connector, but this one, it works for what I'm doing. I don't want to go too crazy. The other thing with blue tape down there is my gas line. That was going to be for the Generac. If I went that route, I went and had a gas line put in. Before the storm, actually just recently finished a new manifold I put on there. So I put a quick connect, and I've got a small little RV generator. It's like 5 kW. I was going to run it so whenever we don't need that much power, I can save my diesel fuel and run a smaller generator in there too. Before we're done, see, just to cover the refrigerators and freezers, if it was something that's going to last quite a while, like February 2021. But on this one, what I have now is I'm just running the generator off of the PTO of a John Deere 3039R. It has electronic ignition on, electronic idle control. Most of the modern tractors do, so that comes into play when you start switching loads. If you want to throw on something big, you're doing your clothes dryer, if you got a pool pump, something else, you'll need to rev up that idle, and on an older tractor, you'll have to do it manually. On the newer tractors, it'll handle the load and keep those RPMs up so your voltage improves, so you don't slew and go down too low. But anyway, I've been running the tractor for about 15-20 minutes, letting it warm up, and I do keep the generator under a tarp when not in use. I have another sheet of metal I was going to drill some holes and mount it on top, so I have a makeshift shelter, so if it was snowing or sleeting like it was yesterday and the day before, it won't get in the generator. It'll keep it dry, so I've got to add that little custom cover on there that I'm working on. But until then, I have the tarp also, and I keep a yellow extension cord under the engine between the tires on the tractor. I put a heater block on there, which is odd for Texas. We live in the Dallas area, but it's worth the extra money because, again, this is the kind of power source we have, and we were out power for a while. And since we live further out, there's a lot of power lines that are aerial and a lot of trees, like you can probably see if I turn the pod this way. You can see there's a lot of trees over there that are bowing and bending over with all the ice in them. My biggest concern was not what we had last year, was the outages for hours whenever the power lines go down like this they did 2 days ago. So for right now, I'll go ahead and start the generator, rev it up, and then switch it over using the double throw disconnects, and at least run it for a few hours just to test it out. I ran it, tested it briefly for like 20 minutes, and then I had to run to my parents and hook up a welding machine that I had, so they had power there for my grandmother and my parents. So I haven't ran this too long yet, but enough to prove out that it works. So before I take everything apart and put it back in storage, I wanted to go ahead and run it one more time for several hours. I needed more time studies on how the fuel consumption is. And another project I was going to work on was actually running natural gas into the air box to blend with diesel, so I could stretch out my diesel consumption if I ever needed to, but just sheer boredom, really, I guess, trying to do stuff. But let me go ahead and start that up, and you can watch it, and that way if you're interested in a PTO generator, it's a great solution, and you can see the procedures out. speed. It may not be 540 RPM on PTO exactly. I go with what the electronics says on it. I don't just throw it quickly from utility to generator power. For the motors and stuff, I just take a moment or two. Also, you'll see in the window there, the lights are on. You probably saw them earlier. They went out whenever I filled the power. Things are running great, no problems. Everything looks good. Plenty of fuel. Engine's warmed up. Cab heater's on, so the windows are kind of melting off. Unfortunately, I had a little problem. I couldn't see the LEDs because the windshield's a little dirty. The back window is. I need to clean that, but it's easier to see than the needles of other brands of PTO generators. I can't see the needle real well. That's why I went with LEDs. I mean, it's obvious it's red and green, so unless you're colorblind, it's really easy to see when you've got the right PTO speed. I'm gonna leave it running here. I'm gonna go inside, hang out a little bit, run off for a few hours, and I'll come back. But just one of the things to think of is if you are running diesel and it's not even natural gas, I've got the brown covered 50-gallon transfer tank with a 12-volt pump. I put it near the engine where I can stretch the hose out, refill the tractor, never shut it down. Another thing is, a lot of the small generators, while I'm thinking about it, you need to change the oil in the filter every 100 hours or less. I think the generators, someone said they were 100 hours. I haven't looked it up recently. I know the small ones you buy at Home Depot that are portable, those don't always have oil filters these days. But those, I've looked up the specs, and they range from 50 to 100 hours in between oil changes. The tractor, that's 200 hours. I just buy a kit. I don't hit 100 hours a year on that thing. I don't even hit 25 hours a year most of the time. But now that I have this, I'll use it more. So I'm getting the oil changes earlier than I need already. So what's the reason for having another motor that I don't use very often to maintain? Anyway, that's my setup, and luckily the neighbors across the street lost their power, but we didn't lose our power. Not lucky for them, but this year it's been great. I put it all up and set it up, and we haven't had to use it. So I want to go ahead and run it, just burn it in more, and change the gearbox oil after 25 hours or after I finish it before I put it in storage. And I'll let you know what happens later.